Welcome back to Everything HR's Culinary Conversations. Today we are welcoming Josh, the founder and owner of Boomchia Superfoods, who earned a spot in Yelp's top 100 restaurants. The goal of the Culinary Conversations is to speak with leaders in the restaurant world to discuss the hardships and successes they've overcome in growing their business. Boomchia Superfoods is the New Jersey's premier superfoods cafe located in the historic Madison Building on Montclair, specializing in vibrant, nutrient-packed bowls with vegan menu that caters to various dietary restrictions. Known for its magic in a bowl, the cafe also serves unique options like kombucha and cold brew on tap. It focuses on providing healthy, organic meals in a fast, casual setting with an emphasis on visually stunning, health-centric foods. Happy to have you here, man.
Hey, thanks, Manuel. I'm super humbled to be on this podcast. As I mentioned, it is my first podcast, so we'll see how it goes. But thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you really created something really unique here, and I would kind of just love to hear your individual story for what led you here.
So I do have like a nutrition and fitness background. I was a personal trainer and I studied nutrition in my mid-20s, and I always had a passion for health-related industries as well as food. I was always a foodie, like after my college days, really interested in exploring different trends and stuff that really would just enlighten my taste buds. So, combining those two, I naturally kind of fell into the industry of acai bowls, which kind of cover both of those. And here I am now, creating different spin on the typical acai bowl, a little bit more health centric. And that's how we created Boomchia.
Nice. So the background, do you just like working out, like lifting kind of thing, or was it more like a personal training and like as an occupation or career?
So my first kind of business that I ever had out of college was a laundromat. I know it's completely out of left field. It's totally different. I ran that for about 6-7 years, and it was very good money, but I never really felt like an intrinsic value from owning a laundromat. I mean, no one really comes into a laundromat and they're not very happy to do their chores. So it was, kind of reflected throughout the entire vibe and atmosphere of the place. And, kind of put me in a mood where I was just never really excited to be at work. And so naturally, right after, and I was about to sell the laundromat, I kind of got into personal training, and I really felt like that was something that I was really passionate about. And so I kind of promised myself, hey, in the next venture I get into, I want to do something that's a little more meaningful for me, even if it's not like something that brings in a lot of money at first. Mainly because personal training too, it was a decent amount of income, but it wasn't substantial. So it wasn't something that I prioritized. So once I reprioritized my passion over monetary kind of rewards, like it was something that was natural to me to get into something like this.
Gotcha. That's awesome. That's definitely a really interesting path, like you said. And I like the fact that you had that entrepreneurship background, like you were already doing something, owning your own business, and then kind of from there, kind of stair-stepping your way into your new passion, which you found now. I think that's really, really cool.
Exactly. Yeah. I love nothing more than going into work now and just kind of just seeing my customers come in really happy to get our bowls. And, it's totally different from what I was before, but I definitely feel that happiness that I was looking for, in doing something.
That's awesome. Well, I'd love to know a little bit more about the organization itself. Kind of how is it structured right now, the team, staff? I mean, even like the training, like I'm sure it's a very unique role. So I'm really curious about how you are kind of handling it.
Yeah, so I always joke around with our staff and a lot of people who are interested, but I tell them that our place is run like a Michelin star restaurant. It's funny because we're a fast casual, just a quick service restaurant, and you don't really see like those strict standards in these type of places. But we're definitely not at the level of Michelin star, like, type of environment. But I joke around mainly because we are definitely a lot more tightly operated, as well as I would say extremely clean to the OCD point, and super customer service centered, to the point where one would believe that it is probably one of like kind of like one of those establishments. So I find that funny, but we do find like that's kind of like a unique, value proposition for our store compared to other quick service restaurants.
I mean, that's really cool though. And that's actually two really, really big parts that if whether you're doing it on purpose or not, the quality of the food itself, how clean are you keeping everything, how bright, like how positive the actual environment is when you're going in there. That's all part of the culture that you're developing. So I really, really like that, you saying it kind of as a joke, but like having that strict accountability, knowing exactly what you want, and then making sure that the entire organization is moving towards that goal. How do you train your team to actually interact with their customers?
So what's funny is when I do interview like my staff, it's less of an interview where I'm asking them questions. It's more of an interview where I'm just trying to scare them that this is probably the most strict, this is probably the worst job you'll ever have in terms of like being on top of everything. And then I give them all these red flags, and then I ask at the end, "Do you still want the job?" And then if they do say yes, then we go on to the normal interview, and then it's just kind of like, okay, if they already said yes, then they're somewhat 50% prepared for this.
Yeah.
And when they do sign on, like there's a lot that goes into it, but I think eventually after probably a couple months where they're working with us, that they soon realize they're a part of something that's a lot greater than just being at just a normal, food place or, normal job where like, okay, now I can see why he's doing this way. And it's also kind of ironic because like they're working a lot harder, a lot more like on top of things compared to other places, but the reaction from the customers are a lot more positive. So they don't have to deal with, bad customers. One thing we really pride ourselves in is like the past 3 years we've been operating, we've never had even one bad customer. So I think that's, speaks volumes to how we treat them, how everything is expected on our end. So it's just kind of like a good, for them to work up to that standard. They are rewarded with good, customer feedback. So I think that's a little unique, and that's how we operate our place.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That is really unique. And I really like that too. Just the way that you structure everything. Like you're not pushing for the outcome. The outcome is just coming because of the standard that you set. I think that's really, really unique. And
Exactly.
the way that you structure it, the way that you hold that accountability, I think that's awesome. So how exactly do you hold that accountability? I feel like sometimes is it, I like as well as how you describe the recruiting aspect of it, sitting there doing those interviews, being upfront, like, hey, we have high standards. This is what it's going to be like. Fair warning, it is hard. This is not easy. Like giving them that precedence up front. It's like that upfront contract. Like this is going to be tough. I hope that you're ready for it. And if not, it's okay. No hard feelings. And if you think you're ready for it, well, let's find out. Like, I love the way that you laid that out right from the very beginning. Can you go a little bit into the actual training part of it? I really am curious about like, do you have standard operating procedures that are written down? Is there like video training? Do you walk them through like kind of shadows? How's that work?
Yes. So something funny is, our video training is I tell them, hey, go on Netflix and watch this movie called Burnt with Bradley Cooper. It's basically a movie about a Michelin star chef, and half the movie he's just throwing pots and pans across the kitchen, and it just kind of shows like in a little bit of an exaggerated form, but not really, how crazy it is in the restaurant industry, especially the fine dining industry, where everything's expected to be perfect in order to be a 5-star restaurant or a Michelin star restaurant, that is. And it's kind of a protection for me because it allows me to be a little bit more stern with my staff, and then they can kind of empathize after they've watched that movie. So I tell them, hey, watch this movie. I'll give you $10. You'll have entertainment value. You'll also get a little bit more on your paycheck. And they always end up watching it in a couple of days and then come back. And I ask them, hey, what'd you think? Like, why do you think I made you watch this movie? And then that's where, immediately they can kind of start empathizing with how I start to operate, during their training. But to go in a little more depth with how I train per se is, we just really Try to find people before even training them that have quick hands, have retail experience, have that experience under pressured environments. We make sure that they know how to use a paring knife so they're not cutting off their fingers. Um, it's tough, but we would say we let go probably about 50% of our candidates in the training because they couldn't cut strawberries. So
Wow, okay.
we give them 9 hours of training before they can prove that they can cut a slice of strawberry into the perfect slice that we expect, not the way that you might do at home. And if it's not up to the standard, then we just tell them, I don't think this is for you. Like I think we can't continue to put more resources into your training. It's something that we just feel like it's not the natural fit. So that's definitely something that people always get taken aback by. And then we have our old overachievers that stand out and they buy their own packs of strawberries or they ask us for leftover bananas and then they practice at home and they come the next day and we know immediately they put in the extra work. So I know it sounds kind of silly knowing that this is again a quick service restaurant, but yeah, this is just like the forefront of our training. And once they get that down, like everything else is pretty standard. Like, make sure you're on top of cleaning, make sure that your customer service is, by far the best that you've ever experienced yourself. And you want to, show that to the customer that you're serving and so on. So yeah, I would say that's kind of like a rough, generalization of how our training goes.
I love the dedication to quality. Like from the way that you're describing, like that is the sole focus and like the biggest takeaway is that like it is quality first, in the team, in the way that you present and the cleanliness, like everything is focused from that standpoint. And like you said, the return on that attention that you guys are giving is that you have only positive clientele. You only have people that enjoy your work, and it's because of the work that you put up front. The thankless hours of making sure that a single strawberry is cut the right way, 9 hours to practice one skill. I think most people, they may not find the value in that, but that is in itself a huge value. And then you see the outcome of it, which is, the positive recognition that your organization is receiving.
Yeah, and I wanted to put in there that we also have like an open kitchen concept where the customer can pretty much see everything going on. We want them to see us cut our strawberries. We want them to see us crafting our bases, and we also made the fridges clear, see through, so that they can see the quality of our ingredients that we use. And everything is very open and transparent. We want them to know how much work we put into this in the back end. And we're very, very proud to show it, straight to them as kind of like an entertainment value too. So, some sort of a showmanship when we're like cutting our fruits and all that kind of stuff. I think that all matters.
That's awesome. And so with that 50% turnover rate when in the training area, do you give them like a probationary? Like, how do you set that up? Because I feel like it's kind of tough. You go through the interview and then you go into training and then, removing about 50% of your team within that probationary period seems like a kind of hard way to handle that. So how do you do it? That's really unique.
It is. I mean, like I said, we do give them the expectation up front that it is going to be tough. We give them 9 hours of training, which is three training shifts. And then, at the end of it, it's less us. It is us letting them go, but at that point, it is kind of mutual. Some of them do realize that this is probably not for them. And it took for them to kind of go through that, quick training period for them to realize. But most of the situations where they are let go, it is kind of mutual at that point. It's like, okay, maybe this is not for me. So yeah, it's a lot easier than you think it is. Like it's less us being like, hey, you're fired. You suck at cutting strawberries. It's more like, oh shoot, like suck at cutting strawberries. I don't think I can do this in a fast paced environment where I have to cut, 2 clamshells of strawberries within like 5 minutes. Like, that's crazy. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And like you said, having that upfront contract, like having that description to them up front, like, hey, this is not going to be easy. I am looking for a specific type of person. No hard feelings if that's not you, but setting it up front. That's awesome. I absolutely love that. Yes. How do you handle the team management? Do you mind telling me a little bit about like your organization's breakdown? Like as owner operator, how much of a team do you have? What's considered full staff when you guys run?
So I have my right hand woman. She's started with me. Her name's Gabby. She's our general manager. She's been with us since the beginning, and she's just worked up the ranks and became a nice leader figure for our store. She's basically just a reflection of who I am, and she can operate the store when I'm not there. We have our assistant manager, and then we have the rest of our staff. Generally, we have either 2 or 3 people on staff at all times, and one's working the base station, one's working the fruit station, and then the last employee is working the toppings and the register. But generally, we have like kind of like a pecking order. The more experienced you are, the more you move towards the base section. So if you're a complete newbie, you're going to be starting out in the register, and then you after a few weeks, if not a month, you'll probably kind of ease into the topping section, and then you probably need about a good 3 months under your belt to start working the fruits, and then at least 6 months to even touch the section where you're crafting the bases, which require a little bit of artistry. So like we have a very very strict way that we layer our bases, so that especially since we're limited in terms of our bases and our toppings, there are people who get 6 bases before even the fruits go on. So like in order to craft those really thin layers, you need a lot of experience with what we call the spade, is what you use just to kind of scoop it. The same thing you scoop ice cream with. But ours is designed a little bit differently. And yeah, it requires a little bit of mastery. So like we tend to be a little reluctant to get our employees there unless they've had a lot of time under their belt. So we're proud to say that we have a significant amount of employees that have worked over 2 years with us. So I think it's definitely something that we know our staff enjoys in terms of being with us as a part-timer.
That's great. Yeah. And I like the way that you have it mapped out in your mind. Do you have it written down anywhere as far as like, 2 weeks to 1 month to learn, X, Y, and Z, and then the next stage is moving on to this area, and the next stage is moving on. Just like that roadmap or timeline is, and like the hierarchy that you have. Do you have that written down, or is it all just like a mental excellence?
We have a 20-page employee handbook that actually covers all of that. So yes, it is expected that our trainees are reading that, and yeah, it's all mapped up. Everything is very, very thought out. It took a while for us to kind of get the SOP down. It would probably, I would say, like a good year before we figured everything out. But even to this day, we're just continuously finding new ways to kind of, create better efficiency, better cleanliness. Like it's a never ending process of just trying to become this well-oiled machine that's, almost impossible to perfect. Like we always have to work at it. So we've come a long ways, but we still got a long ways to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, with 3 years doing it, what are some challenges you found kind of in the first year that you were able to overcome to this point? Because I feel like 3 years is still, not new. Obviously, you've gone through it, you're writing your SOPs down, but like, what were some problems that that you had to overcome? Like, for example, supply chain management, like actually finding all the fruits and the food that you use in your services. Like that's all its own unique processes.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to efficiency and mainly time efficiency. It's like I go the extra mile to source our ingredients, especially our fruits. I go directly to Hunts Point Market, which is in a totally different state, and I drive there at 4 a.m. every morning, and I go there, and that's where all the fruit that comes from the farms from California or Florida, they come through there before they're distributed to everywhere else in the Northeast. So when I'm there, it's a very harsh environment, super cold, especially in the winter, but even the cooler itself is cold. And I'm there for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, just picking out the best fruits I can find. And if I can't find them where they're out in the coolers, I go directly into the trucks. Don't tell them that I did this because this is actually not allowed. But I pull out my flashlight on my camera, and then I'm going through like the new pallets in the truck. And I'll dig down to the bottom middle part pallet and find the best strawberries I can find. And I do that 3 times a week, every week. And I've been doing that. And I realized like it's not the most sustainable way to go about, especially if we were to expand one day. So I've cut down on those trips a little bit by getting some deliveries, and I'll also ask my general manager to make a few trips. So it's definitely those efficiencies that we try to crack down on. Where, hey, am I wasting too much time doing this so that I'm not offering enough time at the store or outside the store working on the store. So it's kind of all that put together. But in terms of like sourcing and all that kind of stuff, you get smarter and smarter in terms of negotiating with your suppliers. Hey, like, we're buying this amount. Can we get this amount off? We're like, in the beginning, it was just like, do what you have to do, accept whatever you can. And there was just too much going on. But now it's like we're leveraging our position, our position in the industry, as well as the amount of volume that we're purchasing, and getting better with that.
Awesome. That's a great business tactic when it comes to scaling, is understanding, wherever you start might not be where you are right now, and it's definitely not going to be where you are in the future. So identifying, like you said, there's always that that breakdown between quality and then consistency. Like, it's always very, very hard when it comes to scaling, because the more complex something is, the more difficult it is to scale. So, exactly. I love it. How exactly are you setting up your deliveries? Are you going there at 4 a.m. every day? Like, when you're in the beginning and you need to like stand out and make that big splash, that seems like an excellent way to make sure that your organization and your recipes really stand out. Like, you're taking that extra mile. And there always comes a time where you'd have to decide, all right, I can't sustain this long term. So I love it.
Yeah. So it's I would say, like, there's no ideal time frame, but for me, in my mind, for a restaurant or a quick service restaurant like this, was like, I have to be front facing for 2 years at least minimum, kind of establish that rapport with my customer base, and then put everything I can into these ingredients and the operations. But you're right. Now I'm at that point where I'm just like, hey, I want to go into a second, third location. I spent a little bit more time than usual that another person would to expand, because I really wanted to perfect this first location before I stepped into another one. But there are fears of like, hey, if I go into a second location, can I maintain this standard? So I always promise myself I'm never going to do it unless I know 150% that I can maintain that standard. So I don't think like a fast expansion is inherently possible for how I designed this place. So we'll take it step by step, slowly, but we'll never, step over our toes and do something that we can't handle. So that's exactly how I want to map out the future of our business, for sure.
Awesome. I mean, that's a great mindset too, because like, you're right, you are at a very unique point in the organization. You got to you don't have to make the decision, but like, you can start playing around with the idea. I have something that is successful. What's the next move, right? Because you kind of built your foundation. You're understanding what the best standard operating procedures are. You're understanding how to simplify your operations while keeping that high quality. What's the next stage? And really, when it comes to scaling restaurants, there's two big angles. The first one is either raising your prices, and that's one way to increase your profit. And then the other way is by genuinely scaling by opening more locations. Those are like the two most common ones. And then usually when that breakdown, it comes into franchising, offering someone your brand, and then they kind of take it and make it their own with some oversight, or independently owning it and then expanding that way, which has its own level of complexity. So really, really unique. What's in, like I said, it doesn't have to be right now, but like, have you considered franchising versus independent owning?
At least for like the first anything under 5 locations, I had it set with my business partner that we would probably just independently owned all locations. I was never really a huge fan of the franchise model for various reasons. I won't really get into that, but I think for whatever I can control, I would want to control until it's to a point where it's too big of an animal for us to do it by ourselves. So yeah. As you can probably summarize from this whole, podcast that I've had so far, is I'm a control freak. I'm also, a micromanager, which is, pretty much the bad trait with a lot of business owners. But that's what happens in the beginning when, you really have to baby your product before it's ready to spread its wings and become its own thing. You know what I mean? So I think it's a necessary step. It's a rite of passage. It's just we can't continue that illness beyond this. So that's one thing that I'm trying to disassociate myself with. I don't want to be a control freak and a micromanager outside of this. So I'm working on that. There's a lot of psychological aspects to being a business owner, and this is definitely one of them.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. And when it comes to micromanaging, I mean, you just want it right the first time, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I definitely get it. I have my own company as well, Omni HR, where we do HR services for restaurants, and same exact mindset. Like, there's a lot of stuff that you feel like you're micromanaging on, but realistically, like, you want it right the first time. You don't
Yes.
want to hurt the brand in any way, because that's essentially the perception that your clients, even your employees, have of the company itself. And that always needs to stay strong. So, no, I definitely love the idea of positive brand recognition, making sure that things are right in the beginning, because once you lose a customer, like, realistically, that's it. There's a very low chance of them coming back towards you unless you have huge volume. So, like,
Right.
that's where, like, the McDonald's and the Burger King, like, Burger King is known, their brand, as not being super, super great, but
Right.
still a very successful company. So how do they balance it? It's just the numbers of restaurants they have. So I definitely get what you're saying, especially when you're starting small. Quality has to be everything. So I love the way you're handling that right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And then when it comes to the brand itself, you were saying that you're focused on this store, making sure that your SOPs and everything is squared away to then ideally, you're saying, like, the 5-store locations. And then you said you can't really scale quickly. Is it more of you don't feel like you're at a place where you can balance multiple locations? Because that, I feel like, is a really big thing. Like, you feel like, obviously not you in general, but like someone else in a similar position when it comes to starting restaurants, it's always hard to open that second store, because then you're balancing two areas, and then one might end up lowering the quality because you feel like you're not in it.
In ways, it seems harder because you're doing two at once. You're juggling two businesses at once. But I think in ways it's a little easier too, because we took this 3 years to kind of work out all the kinks and operational inefficiencies, so that this second location, when we get into it, we can kind of hit the ground running and really operate from 3 years of experience in that first location. So I think it becomes a little easier in terms of like sourcing. We can also leverage our volume, do a lot more bulk discounts. So technically our bottom line will also go down as well. So in a lot of aspects, I think it could make things not necessarily easier, but there are going to be a lot of advantages to opening up a second location. Now, when that gets to 3, 4, 5, I think obviously it just gets more and more challenging, because like I can't spend all my time just at these two locations. Now I have to jump around to 3, 4, 5. That's when I think you just need to find the right team.
Yeah.
And then when you're able to do that, you can and have people you can trust to own and operate it. Then you should be good. So I mean, that's where I'm thinking, like, after 4 or 5 locations, maybe it is the right thing to think about franchising. So that's uncharted waters. I don't want to think about it now, but I know exactly how I'm going to deal with the next 2 locations, and we'll see how it goes from there.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, it definitely adds that extra layer of complexity, like you were saying. And then how are you guys managing? You don't have to go super deep dive into this, just but like, how are you guys managing your back admin? Because I feel like that's really unique when it comes to restaurants, traditional businesses, when it comes to recruiting, payroll, like a lot of the HR or that structure, like they kind of, it's really just copy and paste for every company. But restaurants, I feel like, is a little different. Usually they start off by like writing paper checks for their team. They kind of handle their own books, and then eventually they either outsource or they will hire someone to do it internally. So I'm curious how you guys kind of manage some of your back admin stuff at this level.
So I'm fortunate to have like a business partner who has minority ownership. He does all the back end work, all the stuff that I wouldn't be able to do on a day to day. And he helps me a lot with the payroll, the admin work, as well as, taxes, all of that. So it makes my life a lot easier. We do outsource some of our stuff, like, we have a CPA, and most of these current day technological platforms, the softwares like QuickBooks and Square, they do a good job of kind of automating everything. So it's become a lot easier than the days when, even like 10 years ago when I had my laundromat, like everything was on paper, all the books was written hand on paper. So I think as much as there is to do on the back end, it's become a lot more streamlined with the technology these days.
Awesome. Yeah, so it seems like you have a very nice balance in the back admin area. So you have some where, like you said, you have your partner that handles a lot of it internally to your organization. Then you also understand that, it's impossible to be an expert in everything, right? Like there's always going to be
Exactly.
something, we all have a limited amount of time. So the stuff that you learn about, the stuff that you actually can put time into to keep that high quality, you also have your outsourcing as well. So I definitely think that the structure you have right now and where you guys are like as a business is super, super awesome. I'm really, really excited to see how you guys kind of move forward from here. And then I was also curious about your recipes as well. Would you say that you guys have a lot of recipe items? Does that affect your food cost, or is it kind of a small amount of items that you can dress up and kind of move and create new recipes with? And also, how often are you changing your recipes? I think you guys have like a fall menu coming out and stuff like that. So how much time is spent brainstorming new recipes and keeping your stuff changing?
Yeah, in regards to our bases, we try to release some seasonal bases that are very, very unique. That requires a little bit of like trial and error. I have a really good suppliers and a very good friend of mine. Fortunately, his name's Anthony, and him and I kind of just brainstorm different different flavor bases that we're going to release every season, and it takes a while for us to get it right, but we eventually do. I think the hardest part is to, like you mentioned really briefly, is getting the cost at the right point where it's sustainable for us. Because there are some seasonal fruits, such as like blood oranges or pomegranates, that are extremely expensive all year round. So it's like, okay, how do we get this into our base without literally like crippling our margins? So like, those are the hard parts in terms of that. Everything else is like we do a create your own salad bowl, so the customer can kind of choose whatever they want in their bases as well as their fruits and their toppings. I'll be straightforward. Like our margins are terrible compared to any other acai bowl place or any other food place for that matter, just because we just use such top notch quality. And we will not compromise on that end, just because that's basically what I built my business off of, is to make sure that the customer is getting the best bowl they can get anywhere. So it's the cost is that our bottom line is terrible. Fortunately, like that is something that hopefully we can control down the end when we have more locations. But at the same time, it's like for us right now, our focus is just getting as many feet in the door as possible, getting our volume up, and then just exposing this to as many people as possible. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to our recipes and all that kind of stuff, it's very, very, I would say, pretty simple. Armin from the previous podcast, Jessica's Cafe, mentioned a very nice little quote, something along the lines of "Mother Nature is the best cook," and I think that rings true in our establishment more than others, mainly because we just use most of the stuff that we use is all natural. So it's, we really don't need to play around with the recipes and stuff. It's just, the customers is pretty much the person who's the chef. They're making their own bowl, their own creation. And all we're doing is just putting nature's best ingredients, healthiest ingredients on the bowl for them. So yeah.
Awesome. No, yeah, it's still focus and quality. I love the way that's at the forefront of every single thought of every action. Like that's always there. So awesome. And I think that's a really nice lead in that kind of goes into how exactly do you guys market? Like, what is your form or your marketing, or what way do you get to get more eyes onto your business? What techniques are you currently using?
I mean, not to be, I'm trying not to come off as too conceited. We
Not
spend
do
zero
it.
dollars on market. We spend zero
Okay.
dollars on marketing. We should spend more money on marketing. As of right now, we're fortunate to have a lot of, other people doing the marketing for us. With the awards that we got annually, as well as, just the old fashioned word of mouth is getting us by. I, as a business owner, should pay a little bit more attention to trying to put some ad dollars into our marketing and be a little more creative with it. But up to this point, we've been very, very happy with the way that we've been exposed without it. So I like the concept of organically and just naturally growing. So maybe I'm just a little too stubborn, but I think, yeah, maybe one day we will do a little bit more marketing. But right now we're just doing just natural marketing.
I got you. Well, that's awesome. I mean, honestly, word of mouth is the best marketing tool because no one
Yes.
is going to trust any marketing that like we do necessarily, but they'll trust the conversation of their friend or family member, someone else. And then when you include social media, word of mouth grows so much faster now. A picture of the bowl or, a small little mention on eating. So like definitely word of mouth, I think, is still the best way to market.
Yeah.
And like I said, focusing on the quality and then everything else kind of comes in after that. That's awesome. And then when you
Right.
guys first started, how did you kind of let people know about your organization? Like, I mean, like year one, you guys opened your doors. Was it like a grand opening sale? Was it flyers? Like, I'm curious about day one. What did that look like?
We had a plan and it didn't go as expected just because we were just so consumed in the in-store operations.
Mhm.
So, when you start off, you have expectations that you could do all these things, um, uh, and the truth of the reality is, once you start operating a business and it starts getting busy, you lose a lot of focus on certain things that you initially set out to do. So, marketing was one of those things, but yeah, we had a grand opening party and this and that. And, we always told ourselves, hey, we're going to do like a mail blast in the local area. We're going to go out and, spin a sign on the corner of a sidewalk or this. None of it happened. We did utilize social media as much as we could in the beginning. That helped us out a lot, but it's something we need to work on to this day. 3 years in, we're still making excuses because there's just so much to get done. But that's the challenge of a business owner. You're literally juggling like 50 things, and then you're asked to content create, and then that's a little running joke in social media these days. Like, especially old fashioned business owners, oh, we have all this stuff to do, and they're asking us to make sure that we still do content creation. So it's like it's a lot. It's a lot, but we're getting to it.
No, that's awesome though, for sure, especially in the beginning. So, were you guys maybe not profitable because of the margins, but like, did you guys start like you opened your doors, you had that party? Was it mainly like friends and family? And then from there, word of mouth kind of grew? Because I feel like
Oh,
when it comes to restaurants opening when you're first, like when you're new, it's really interesting. How exactly do you bring people to your doors? Like, is it just, we open the doors and they will come kind of thing? Or is it more like a direct approach? Because I feel like once people visit, then word of mouth starts. So, like, what is it that gets them to engage? Or is it maybe just the concept? Like, is it people just love bowls in your area? And then, that's kind of, I want to try this new place. Because that can definitely as well just be a unique situation. So, I'm just curious about how do you get that first group in to then ignite the word of mouth fire that you guys have?
Oh, that first group didn't come until a year after we opened our business. So I'm glad you
Okay.
sniffed that out because we lost a lot of money our first year. I think in this industry, even in the first year, if you're breaking even, you're lucky. Us, we didn't even break even. I was working 100 hours a week, a little over. We were open 7 days a week, and I remember I took Thanksgiving off and um, Christmas off. And the reason why I mentioned this is I was working that much the whole time. I thought we were making money, and it wasn't until next tax season where we realized I lost. And I don't mind being straightforward with this, but we lost $30,000 that first year. We didn't make any money. And it was just very humbling to know that I was working that hard, the hardest I've ever worked in my life, and I wasn't even making a dollar. I didn't even make a dollar that year. And then we had our first lucky break when we had that Yelp article come out. We were ranked number one place to eat in all of New Jersey in 2022. That article hit right, I believe, right after Christmas. And I felt like it was luck at the time, but then I realized, hey, all that work that I put in that first year, culminated to that point. So none of it was in vain. And ever since that article came out, like we had our first rush of customers coming in only a week later. Even like demographics we would never expect, like senior citizens were coming. And we just saw a huge influx of customers that spring. And then from there, that's all she wrote. Like it was just that was our first break. And so, yeah, there was no like secret sauce. There was no like, but that was definitely the defining moment. It just wasn't when we were expecting it. Everyone who opens up, we expect things to be a smashing success from the beginning. It's kind of like this fairy tale like dream that all business owners have even before they open up, obviously. But it's so hard. It's so hard. It requires a ton of patience. And some people aren't cut out for it. I know a lot of businesses probably would have just, closed their doors after 6 months of what we went through, at least. So perseverance, again, something that Armin mentioned a lot. He's my top 100 lister, so he probably understands as well. It's something that it requires a lot more patience than normally you would think.
Yeah. First off, thank you so much. Like, I like the honesty because it's something that I feel like is kind of glamorized. Like entrepreneurship, starting a business, it's really glamorized and it's hard. Like it's tough
so hard
work. And in the beginning, like you do not see any anything coming back to you for all the hard work that you're putting in. And I feel like that's one of the big issues that leads to failure and people honestly just giving up is that they're like, oh, I'm going to open this and I'm going to succeed. And then 1 year, not profitable, but consistently pushing hard, consistently focusing on the quality, knowing that the actions that you put in today may not help you today or tomorrow, but months or even years from now, that's what's coming in. And being able to like take that hit, like being able to say like, all right, this was tough. Is there anything that I need to change? I mean, there's typically always something that needs to change, but let me slowly, fix this today and then focus on these two things tomorrow. And then, so on and so forth until you get better and better and better and just keep focusing on it and then eventually winning. Like that's awesome. I really, really appreciate the honesty that you brought out there because I feel like that's something that isn't talked about enough. The first year is hard. The first few years is tough. It's very, very rare to open something and it immediately be profitable. But I feel like that's the common viewpoint. Like people think that's what it's like because they only see it after you win, right? They don't see the struggle in the beginning. So that's awesome. I definitely love it. When you were going through it and like that tough time frame, what were you focusing on? Is it the actions? Is it the quality? Were you worried kind of about the numbers? I mean, obviously worrying about the numbers when you're losing money, that has to be a part of it. But, what were the things that kind of kept you pushing in it and not giving up on the dream?
I mean, there's this pride that is a good and a bad thing in a business owner. The first part is when you have that pride of, hey, you really believe in your product and you don't know why you're failing, but you think that you should be succeeding. And you just keep holding on to that. It's kind of like a hope, but it's a stubborn hope. That kept me going. But at the same time, that also inhibits or actually it restricts you to make changes because at one point you do have to realize, hey, something's not working. And that pride can't get in the way of you kind of looking at it from a second person's perspective outside in and being like, okay, this product does need a little bit of, work, like you do need to change something. Something's not working. So like it was a twofold thing. So like that pride kept me hopeful, but at the same time, near like the second half of year one, like I was like, okay, we need to make some changes here and there. It was really, really hard for me to accept those changes, but I did, and it did. I felt like it definitely helped as well. So I wanted to mention like 1 year and the break that I got after 1 year is, like you said, for a lot of business owners, that's more than 1 year. It's 2 years, 3 years sometimes. And anyone who's out there losing hope after 1 year, and just because you didn't get it after that first year, it's, if you really truly believe in what you're doing, I would say like, really stick with it for at least a couple years and then, reassess, because, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. I think 1 year was lucky for me, even so. So if you're hitting the lottery, you might be a success in the first, 6 months, but it's very rare.
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely get that. And like I said, my company, Omni HR, we're, still within that rocky cut scene. I have a small
Yeah.
team and, we're trying our best to help out different restaurants and doing our outreach. And I learned one thing doing this is that I'm not a salesperson. Like you said, like as far as the marketing idea, I'm just not a sales guy. I'm not really a content creation guy. I'm trying to do it more.
Yeah.
But the dynamic is really pushing to help restaurants. And like you said, following the dream and then seeing where that takes you and just pushing forward to it. So I got a stat here that I wanted to say, and I think that this is a great point from you. The National Restaurant Association estimates that about 30% of restaurants fail within the first year. Some say it's closer to 60% in year one and 80% within year five. So 80% failure rate after 5 years. Why do you think it's so high for restaurants?
That stat is actually a lot more generous than I thought. I thought it was after 2 years, 80% fail. But yeah, I mean, even so, I'm not surprised. It's just, I mean, you see a lot of like social media videos these days saying that the worst business to open up is a restaurant. And I'll kind of touch upon that, is that there's just so much on the back end in terms of expenses and overhead that just like are unvariable and variable. But the ones in terms of variable are the cost of goods fluctuates so much. So the cost of chicken can be 4 times the price it is now in a month. You know what I mean? Or there was this one period of time a couple years ago where there was an egg shortage, and eggs are a huge ingredient in most restaurants. And that price went up. I think like 7, 8 fold. I don't know the exact stat, and those are things that you can't really control. You know what I mean? And you can't really price it in either. If you were to price that in and inflation and all that kind of stuff, no one would come to your restaurant. Your food costs would be extremely high. So it's, when those kind of things happen, it's just like your business is making no money, and then that's only one out of probably like hundreds of ingredients you have. At any point, any other ingredient can fall under that circumstance, and that's just one category of expenses. Then you have payroll, which I think right now the ratio is completely off in terms of inflation and how much the minimum wage is, and only us business owners and food operators can understand that. But like, it's crippling to have to pay our employees, $17, $18 an hour, and then still not get the performance that we would expect from that rate that we would if it was 6 years ago, right? So it's like, that's another thing. It's like, how many staff can I have before payroll is above 30, 40% of our total income, right? And then rent is also just creeping up there. Insurance, there's just so many things. And then like, your whole business is relying on volume. But then you also have a bottom line problem. There's just very little margin for profits overall. And so I think that's the reason why most places fail. I would say most places fail because they do have a top line issue, but there are also places that are doing extremely well, but they have a crazy bottom line issue that's just gone too far that they can't even fix in a short period of time. So I know I kind of, generalized everything, but that's my, opinion on that.
Yeah. No, I love it too because it's not just one thing, and I think that's a great way that you broke it down. It's not just one thing isn't going to make or break you necessarily. It's a ton of small things, your
Yeah.
food costs, your labor costs, the hours, the operations themselves, supply chain management, like everything together. And then honestly, at some point, maybe just giving up, like on top of everything else, like on top of not having the funds, because I feel like like managing the capital itself is huge. And then at some point, you might just get the feeling that like this isn't worth the trouble. When you look, 3 years in a row of negative profit, I definitely can see that, I'm tired of being in the red. Let me look at something else. So yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of things that could lead to it. And I think that's the hard part is that it's not just one thing. It's because it's so many different things. You have to be able to weather the storm, right? Like you said, that fluctuating food costs, you have to have the funds to be able to weather it and to just deal with it and not try to push that cost onto your customers because then you're not going to have that long-term customer base that you really need if you want word of mouth and if you want to succeed. So I definitely like what you said there. So
Yeah,
do you
and then
think
say that you're successful, you're finally starting to be in the green after a couple of years, and then a competitor comes in and sets up shop right down the street. Can't
Yep.
control that either, right? So it's like just when you get your break, someone else comes in and takes half your pie. Like, it's so many things that I'm pretty sure if I were to go on my normal day and think about all the things, like, we really wouldn't be able to sit here and discuss all of that, but the list goes on.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Right. We'll just sit here, we'll get a note and we'll just knock them all out one by one. No, for
Right.
sure. And then I think another big thing as well is education. So that's actually one of the purposes of this podcast. I think that sharing the knowledge from experts like you that have been in it for years now, like, you've been in doing this hustle for so many years that you have the knowledge because you've overcame it. And then you're going to have another obstacle, which is going to be that scaling. And then how are you going to overcome that? So I definitely think that sharing this kind of knowledge is a benefit for that long term. How about yourself? Like, do you think that education would be a benefit? Because, like I said, the goal is to lower the 50%, the 5-year 80% failure rate. Do you think education can chip away at that at least a little bit?
Undeniably. I think a large part of that percentage is first time business owners. So it's, people, there's a whole book written about it, which is the E myth, the entrepreneur myth. Like a technician comes in and, they think they can operate a business with their specified skill set, and they just realize there's just so much more to it. And, I've had previous business partners who came out of corporate and thought they can kind of, tango with me. And they just realized really quickly, this is not what they thought it was. And you mentioned it before. It's just, you see all the glamorous sides of business after all has been accomplished. And even if it hasn't been accomplished day to day, like a customer comes into your store, and even if it's not a successful business, you're just like, the fact that you own a business, oh, you're successful, you make a lot of money. So like, they get this false impression. I think that false impression is spread very, very, to the mass media, and people who think they can get into it have no idea what they're getting themselves. So I think it's for us to create awareness. I wouldn't go as far as to do what I do in my interviews, where I just like red flag, red flag, red flag. This is why you shouldn't do it. But I wouldn't also go to far away from that either, because like, I think it's good to warn people what could potentially happen, and what that the odds are against you. Once someone knows that and then they get into business, I think they're much better prepared, and having that expectation, lowering their expectations in a lot of areas can make that experience a lot easier and probably more probable for success if they know. So yes, to highlight your point, like education is everything. The awareness is everything. Everyone needs to know what they're getting themselves into before they get into it.
For sure. I like the way that you said that to the expectation, because I think that's exactly what it is. It's just misaligned expectation. You think it's going to be easy or you think it's going to be hard, but you don't know how hard,
Yeah.
So I definitely think that is a huge part is that expectation. And then another big thing that we're doing with Omni HR is helping out with the services side. So like we talked about a little bit out earlier, it's really hard to be an expert in everything. So Omni HR, we specifically only focus on the back admin. So, the recruiting aspect, focusing on the culture of the type of people that you want. We look at the payroll side, focusing solely on restaurant payroll because it does have its own differences. Sure, the federal and state might be similar to other traditional businesses, but, the restaurants live their own life. So doing that, understanding the compliance, understanding those areas. So there's so many moving parts when it comes to running a restaurant. Do you think it'd be at least a little bit easier for certain restaurants if they were focused solely on the front end, right? Solely on, interacting with the customer, training their team members, making sure that is a kind of just simplifying. Like we said, it's trying to simplify all that complexity. Do you think that would be a little bit of a benefit out in the giant restaurant world?
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't have come this far if it wasn't for someone handling all that in the back end. And if I didn't have someone handling all that in the back end, I would have delegated to, a company that could, just like you guys. It allows me to focus on everything where, when I'm having that direct relationship or interaction with the customer, I feel like that's the most important thing. All that stuff, like I don't want to sit around and do QuickBooks or, scheduling and all the HR stuff 8 hours a day when I could be making an impact in store, interacting with my customers, making sure the quality of our products is great. So yes, 100%. I think that it makes our jobs as business owners so much easier to do what we're meant to do rather than, just sit back there and do stuff that an admin should be doing for you or another software company or like you guys, an HR company assistant company can do for you. So I think it's necessary for sure.
Awesome. All right, last question for you. So, if there is one trick, one tip, one piece of advice that you would give to someone either just starting out or a veteran who's been in the game for quite some time, what would you recommend to them?
I haven't learned this until recently, but my father taught me at a young age when I was helping him out at his convenience store that he owned, is we as business owners should not be doing a job that a minimum wage employee or our staff can be doing for us. And we shouldn't be consuming our times to do that type of work. We should be doing a job where our hourly is valued in the hundreds. You know what I mean? Something that's a lot more meaningful to grow the company. So it's one of the hardest things for business owners to do, but and you see this a lot in this day and age in educational, social media videos and whatnot, but you should not be working in the business. You should be working on the business. So if that means you shouldn't be in the store, but you should be outside the store, kind of just working on everything that can help you grow. That's a lot more important. But it's hard for us to think that way because we're taking 2 steps back to take 1 step forward. It's very risky in our mindset. But the only way we can come across to doing that is we have to truly believe in ourselves. You know what I mean? We are the ones, the superheroes that made this business, and we're the ones that can carry it to where it can be. But once we lose that confidence in ourselves, we'll continue to just be in the day and day and do everything that our staff is doing. And not necessarily growing the business. It's just going to plateau. You know what I mean? So it took for an outside, mentor of mine to tell me, hey, like you got to get off the hamster wheel. Like stop running in the same place. You have to get off of it and start doing something a lot more meaningful for your business to help it grow. So that's my biggest advice. I know a lot of you business owners out there are still in there, 8, 12 hours a day, scooping ice cream or still cooking. Like have someone else do it for you, or at least train them to do it for you, and go outside and grow your business.
Awesome advice. Josh, thank you so much. If you stick If you stuck with us this long, I truly appreciate it. If you like the content, please rate the show. And if you're feeling a little crazy, maybe share it with someone.